This is absolute fucking madness. You will need to pay attention very closely or this will make zero sense. The first thing you've got to understand is that this is not chess in the two-dimensional sense. You can move up, down, left and right like in normal chess, obviously, but you can also move backwards in time and sideways through timelines. For the sake of this explanation, we'll call this moving through turns and moving through timelines. The same movement principles that determine where a piece can move on the 2D board also apply to moving a piece through the two new dimensions. Let's demonstrate. When I move the knight normally on the board, I have to move 3 spaces in total. 2 spaces in one direction, and then 1 space in a direction that makes a 90-degree angle with the first movement. Basically, an L shape. If I want to move a piece through turns or timelines, I also have to obey this principle. You can see in this example board that we have a knight in B1. In a normal game of chess, as is demonstrated by the green squares, I'd be able to move in an L shape into A3, C3, or D2. If we zoom out a little, you'll see that we can also move the knight backward in time. Initially, I saw B3 and thought, that doesn't make any sense. If I place the knight there, he has only moved 2 squares, that's an illegal move. On closer inspection though, it makes perfect sense. Since time in 5D chess is a dimension that your pieces can physically traverse, moving to B3 one turn ago makes perfect sense. Instead of moving the knight 2 squares laterally and 1 square longitudinally, we've moved him 2 squares laterally and 1 square temporally. The square in this case being a turn. Let's look at another example. In this board setup, the knight we moved last turn is now on a board in a separate branched off reality. For giggles, you'll note that I now have 3 knights on the board. If I select him, you can see the standard L shapes on the board that he can move to. You'll also note that the spaces on this parallel board in the original timeline that are unoccupied or occupied by a black piece are now fair game for this knight to move into. Note again that the available spaces in the original timeline are not L-shaped movements. You're fulfilling the L shape by moving 2 spaces physically and 1 space through the timeline. If I zoom out, you can see that I can also move 2 spaces physically and move back 1 turn, also fulfilling the L shape. If I zoom out further yet, you'll notice that this board over here is fair game to move into, but that the space you move into is the same space as the space on the board you're moving from. This is because to get here, you'd be moving 2 spaces by moving back 2 turns and 1 space through the timeline. This fulfills the L shape even though the piece has done no physical movement. If this sounds confusing, it's because it very much is. If you're at all curious about this game, I'd recommend picking it up. Understanding how this movement works is by far the hardest part of the game. If you don't grok this now, you probably will after a couple hours play.